Hi, my name is Netta Ofer, and I'm very excited to present Felt Experiences with Kombucha Scoby, exploring first-person perspectives with living matter, done in collaboration with Mirela Alistar at the Atlas Research Institute at the University of Colorado Boulder. In this work, we explore first-person perspectives, specifically our own felt experiences with a living organism through design research. The organism we worked with was Kombucha Scoby, which afforded us several sensory experiences. For example, if you have ever brewed your own kombucha tea, you know that the Scoby has a strong smell and a slimy texture. So a bit about Kombucha Scoby. Scoby stands for Symbiotic Culture of Bacteria and Yeast. It is a cellulose biofilm that grows on the surface of the kombucha culture and thickens over time. Growing it does not require biosafety protocols, making it accessible for researchers and designers who don't have access to a biolab. And it can be grown from store-bought kombucha teas. In our process, we grew Kombucha Scoby from a commercial kombucha tea with live cultures, fed it by adding a sweet black tea medium once a week, and we covered the culture and stored it at 30 degrees Celsius for optimal growth. After at least 2 weeks of growth, the Scoby is robust and can be harvested from the culture and laid out to dry. After 2 to 4 days, the Scoby is dry, and it resembles a paper or leather-like material depending on how long it was grown for. We originally set out to explore the opportunities of designing with Kombucha Scoby in the context of BioHCI. We engaged in a material exploration where we tested several fabrication techniques with Kombucha Scoby, such as molding the Scoby by drying it on 3-dimensional forms, laser cutting Scobies and weaving them together and with other materials, penetrating the Scoby with a needle for sewing and embroidery, and layering wet Scobies on top of each other to dry and bond, and also encapsulate other materials such as conductive graphite powder in between layers. We learned several fabrication insights, and more importantly, these fabrication tests with the Kombucha Scoby served as a hands-on introduction to growing and handling Kombucha Scoby. However, many times, the Scoby did not grow or behave as we expected. Many times, cultures would have all the right conditions, but robust biofilms would not develop. Of course, there is an opportunity to develop the perfect bioreactor and streamline the production of robust Scobies. But this prompted us to reflect on the way we were approaching the design practice. In addition to design with living matter, we draw from more than human design that attempts to decenter the human, design research that prompts reflection, and soma-aesthetic design which emphasizes the body and felt experiences as key during the design process. Through all these lenses together, we arrived at a shift from a material mindset where the designer manipulates the material to recognizing the organism as an active entity that has agency and a voice in the design process. We specifically wanted to further engage with the livingness of the organism. For example, seeing the Scoby grow and change over time, hearing the fermentation of the culture, and physically feeling the texture or the body of the Scoby. We propose sensory engagement probes, a practice of designing props or objects for sensing the organism. When in use, they bring forward felt experiences and communicate them, and they prompt reflection with the human designer. We imagine the sensory engagement probes as part of a broader design process with living organisms. So instead of growing the organism, harvesting it when it's ready to be used, and assembling it into a design object, we suggest noticing the changes of the organism over time, its texture, size, color, smell, and designing objects that will elicit a specific sensory experience. The sensory engagement probes act as a metaphorical extension of ourselves towards the organism and draw out latent experiences. We designed 3 sensory engagement probes and present an autoethnographic account that describes how we reached each one of the objects. A probe for watching the Scoby grow and thicken over time. A probe for listening to the kombucha fermentation after feeding the culture. And a probe for touching the Scoby's texture. In the next few slides, I will share the story of the listening probe. Shortly after feeding the kombucha culture, it ferments and displays an active fizz. After an unexpected encounter of hearing a gentle hissing sound from one of our kombucha jars, we attempted to capture this activity by capturing a sound recording of the fermentation. What you're about to hear is not only the fermentation fizz, but drops of condensation dripping and the acoustics of the jar. To further engage in the sounds that live with and come from the kombucha cultures, we started to prototype and design a physical probe for listening. We first paper prototyped a horn-shaped object to test if this object would help highlight the acoustics of the Kombucha Scoby. We later 3D printed another horn-shaped object that could fit on top of the jars. We came back to the listening probe and used it several times throughout this work, whenever we wanted to check on the culture's health and growth, and also when we wanted to reconnect with the organism. As you can see, the listening probe was designed to be situated directly between the listener and the organism. This demonstrates the act of extending oneself towards the organism, possibly creating closeness and intimacy between us and the kombucha. In addition, the cone-shaped end does not adhere to the Kombucha Scoby jar, asking us to hold and support it in its place, requiring us to stay close, still, and present. The practice of designing sensory engagement probes and using them materialized a different orientation for us, which we call inwards as a means to outwards. We turned to our bodily, sensory, felt experiences, or in other words, ourselves, to notice essential qualities of the organism and redirect ourselves towards other bodies and refocus the design process as a whole. Soma aesthetic design emphasizes this inwards turn, and in this work we found this orientation to draw our attention to the non-humans we work with, and to more generally the motivations and actions in our design practice. Designing sensory engagement probes also shifted our mindset from acting on to acting with, from manipulating the organism as a material to working with and alongside it. This is an attempt to step towards the horizontal orientation in more than human design, proposed by Ron Wakari, essentially looking for opportunities of humility, contact and connection, and recognizing our human privilege. To conclude, designing with living matter is pushing the boundaries of design and interaction in HCI. However, it is still conforming to the specific orientations of human-centered design. Through first-person perspectives, when designing with Kombucha Scoby, we reflect on what and how the organism invites and prompts us to create. Being attentive to our own lived and sensed experiences, we were inspired to further engage with the organism and perhaps through designed forms create new opportunities for such engagements and reflections. Experiences of crafting and using the sensory engagement probes gave rise to understandings and new meanings between us, the designers, and the organism. Thank you for joining us, and please reach out with any comments or questions.